The sound of hammering echoed through the canyon as Zelda Emerson drove the final nail into the fence post, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her weathered hand. The year was 1878, and the small ranch outside Sonora, California, had been hers for exactly 3 months since her father passed, leaving her with nothing but dry land, a struggling vegetable garden, and a determination that burned hotter than the summer sun overhead. She straightened, surveying the barren property with a critical eye. Everything needed water. The stream that ran along the eastern edge of her land was little more than a trickle, rushing past too quickly to do her any good. It mocked her as it flowed toward the valley below, carrying away the one thing that could make this place thrive. She had tried digging irrigation trenches, but the water just kept moving, refusing to pool where she needed it most. Zelda was 22 years old. With auburn hair she kept pinned back in a practical bun, and green eyes that showed the kind of steel her father had always admired. She wore a simple cotton dress that had seen better days, the hem stained with mud and the sleeves rolled up past her elbows. Her hands were calloused from work, and her shoulders ached from the endless labor of trying to make something from nothing. The sound of heavy footfalls made her turn, and that was when she first saw him. Yancey Dalton was a mountain of a man, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the sun. His arms were thick with muscle that rippled beneath his sun-bronzed skin, and his chest strained against the worn fabric of his work shirt. He had dark hair that fell past his shoulders in waves, with a few days of stubble covering his strong jaw. His eyes were a startling blue, the color of the sky on a clear winter morning, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He carried an axe over one shoulder like it weighed nothing at all, and a bedroll was strapped to his back. Everything about him spoke of raw strength and self-sufficiency. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate in her chest. "Name's Yancey Dalton. I've been working claims up in the high country, and I'm passing through on my way to town. Wondered if you might spare some water for a thirsty traveler." Zelda found herself staring and quickly recovered, gesturing toward the well. "Of course. Help yourself." She watched as he set down his axe with careful precision and drew water from the well, drinking deeply from the ladle. His throat worked as he swallowed, and she found herself noticing the way his muscles moved beneath his skin, the sheer power contained in his frame. "Much obliged," he said, setting the ladle down and turning back to her. His gaze swept over the property, taking in the struggling garden, the fence she had been working on, the way the stream rushed past without offering any benefit. "You running this place alone?" "I am now," she said, lifting her chin slightly. "My father passed 3 months ago." Something shifted in his expression, a softness that seemed at odds with his imposing presence. "I'm sorry for your loss. That's a heavy burden for anyone to carry alone." "I manage," she said, though even she could hear the weariness in her own voice. Yancey looked at the stream again, then back at the dry garden. His brow furrowed in thought. "You know, if you had a pond instead of a running stream, you could irrigate this whole property. Keep the water where you need it." Zelda laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And how exactly would I manage that? The stream runs too fast, and I don't have the money to hire workers to build a dam." He studied her for a long moment, then glanced up at the sun, which was still high in the sky. "It's early yet. If you'd allow me, I could help you with that. There are enough boulders in that canyon that we could dam the stream right where it enters your property. Create a natural pond that would feed your irrigation trenches." She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You're talking about moving boulders. That would take days, maybe weeks." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his rugged features into something almost boyish. "Maybe for most men. But I've spent the last 5 years working in the mountains, moving rock and earth. I know what I'm doing." "Why would you do that for a stranger?" she asked, suspicion and hope warring in her chest. He picked up his axe, hefting it with easy strength. "Because I can see you need help, and because there's something in your eyes that tells me you've been fighting alone for too long. Everyone deserves a helping hand now and then." Zelda felt something shift inside her, a crack in the wall she had built around herself since her father died. "I can't pay you much," she said slowly. "I'm not asking for payment," Yancey said. "Just point me toward those boulders, and maybe have some supper ready when I'm done. That'll be payment enough." She led him to the canyon where the stream entered her property, a rocky area filled with stones of all sizes. Some were small enough for her to lift, but others were massive ancient things that looked like they had been there since the beginning of time. Yancey set down his gear and rolled his shoulders, studying the landscape with the practiced eye of someone who understood the land. "We'll start with the biggest ones," he said. "Create a solid foundation, then fill in the gaps with smaller stones. The stream will pool behind it, and you'll have your pond." He approached the first boulder, a massive piece of granite that had to weigh at least 500 pounds. Zelda watched as he braced his legs, wrapped his powerful arms around the stone, and lifted. The muscles in his back bunched and flexed, his biceps bulging with the strain. For a moment, nothing happened, and then the boulder began to move. Inch by inch, Yancey carried it toward the stream, his breathing heavy but controlled. Sweat began to soak through his shirt, making it cling to the powerful contours of his body. He positioned the boulder carefully at the narrowest point of the stream bed, setting it down with a grunt of effort. "That's one," he said, turning back to survey the canyon. Zelda stood transfixed as he went back for another, then another. Each boulder was a monumental task, requiring every ounce of his considerable strength, but he worked with a steady determination that spoke of years of hard labor. His hands gripped the rough stone, his legs drove him forward step by step, and his entire body strained with the effort. She found herself unable to look away. There was something almost hypnotic about watching him work, the raw display of masculine power, the way he refused to quit even as the sun climbed higher and the heat intensified. After he had moved 6 of the largest boulders, she hurried to the well and brought him water. "You should rest," she said, holding out the ladle. He drank gratefully, water running down his chin and dripping onto his chest. "I'm fine," he said, though she could see the exhaustion in the set of his shoulders. "I want to get this done before evening." "Why?" she asked. "What's the rush?" His blue eyes met hers, and she saw something there that made her heart skip. "Because I want to see you smile," he said simply. "I have a feeling it's been a long time since you've had a reason to." The honesty in his words left her speechless. She watched as he returned to his work, attacking the boulders with renewed vigor. He rolled some that were too heavy even for him to lift, using thick branches as levers to shift them into position. His hands grew scraped and bleeding, but he never complained, never slowed. Zelda found herself pitching in where she could, gathering smaller rocks to fill the gaps between the boulders, using mud from the stream bank to help seal the cracks. They worked side by side in companionable silence, and she found herself stealing glances at him whenever she thought he was not looking. There was something about Yancey Dalton that drew her in, something beyond his obvious physical strength. It was the quiet competence with which he worked, the way he seemed to understand exactly what needed to be done without her having to explain. It was the gentleness in his eyes when he looked at her, despite the raw power in his frame. As the afternoon wore on, the dam began to take shape. The stream, which had been flowing freely through the canyon, started to slow as the wall of boulders rose higher. Water began to pool behind the dam, spreading out across the rocky canyon floor. Yancey positioned the last few massive stones with meticulous care, making sure the structure was sound. He tested it by pushing against the boulders with all his weight, checking for any give or weakness. Satisfied, he stepped back and watched as the water continued to rise. "Give it another hour or so," he said, wiping his brow with his forearm. "The pond should fill to a good depth by then." Zelda looked at what they had accomplished, hardly able to believe it. Where there had been nothing but a rushing stream just hours before, there was now a growing body of water, dark and still and full of promise. The irrigation trenches she had dug would be able to draw from this, giving life to her garden, her orchard, everything she had been struggling to grow. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Yancey replied, but she could hear the pleasure in his voice. She turned to look at him fully, this stranger who had walked onto her property and changed everything in the span of an afternoon. He was covered in dust and sweat, his hands torn and bleeding, his shirt soaked through. But his eyes were bright with satisfaction, and when he met her gaze, something passed between them, a connection she could not name but felt in every fiber of her being. A smile spread slowly across her face, the first genuine one she had felt since her father died. It started small, but grew until she was grinning like a fool, joy bubbling up inside her chest. Yancey went very still, his eyes locked on her face. "There it is," he said softly. That's what I was hoping to see. She laughed, the sound bright and clear in the evening air. You're impossible, she said. You just moved half a mountain's worth of boulders for a woman you don't even know. I'm starting to know you, he said, moving closer. And I'd like to know you better if you'll let me. Her breath caught at the intensity in his voice. You said you were passing through, she managed to say. I was, he agreed. But maybe I've found a reason to stay. The sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. The pond was nearly full now, the water lapping gently at the edges of the dam they had built together. Zelda felt her heart racing as Yancey stood there, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. Stay for supper, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's the least I can do. I'd like that, he said. They walked back to the house together, and Zelda was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the way his long stride matched hers, the occasional brush of his arm against hers. She felt simultaneously nervous and excited, like she was standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. Inside the modest cabin, she set about preparing a meal while Yancey washed up at the basin. She made venison stew from meat she had traded for in town, along with fresh bread she had baked that morning. It was simple fare, but she put care into it, wanting to give him something good after all his hard work. They ate at the small wooden table her father had built, and conversation flowed easily between them. Yancey told her about his life in the mountains, about working claims and living alone in the wilderness. He spoke of the silence up there, the way the stars looked at night, the fierce independence required to survive. Why did you leave? She asked, genuinely curious. He was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. I was looking for something, he said finally. I just didn't know what it was until I found it. And what did you find? She asked, her heart pounding. His gaze held hers across the table. I think you know the answer to that. The intimacy of the moment hung between them, fragile and precious. Zelda felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she did not look away. There was something happening here, something she had never experienced before, and it terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Tell me about yourself, Yancey said, breaking the tension gently. How did you end up here alone? She told him about her father, about how they had come west together when she was just a girl after her mother died. She spoke of the dreams they had shared for this land, the plans they had made that would never come to fruition. She told him about the loneliness of the past 3 months, the bone-deep weariness of trying to do everything herself. I keep thinking I should sell, she admitted. There have been offers, but every time I consider it, I remember my father's face when he first saw this place. He believed in it, even when it seemed impossible. And you? Yancey asked. What do you believe? She looked at him, at this mountain man who had rolled boulders to dam her stream, who had given her hope when she had almost none left. I'm starting to believe in possibilities again, she said quietly. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face, softening the hard edges and revealing the warmth beneath. Good, he said, because this land has potential. With that pond, you could grow enough to not just survive, but thrive, maybe even plant an orchard, raise some livestock. That would take time, she said. And help. I have time, he said, and I'm offering help if you want it. She studied him carefully, trying to understand what he was really saying. You barely know me, she pointed out. What if I'm difficult to work with? What if we drive each other mad? He laughed, a deep, rich sound that filled the small cabin. Then we'll drive each other mad together. But somehow I don't think that's going to be a problem. As the evening deepened, Zelda found herself reluctant for him to leave. They talked until the candles burned low, sharing stories and dreams, finding common ground in unexpected places. She learned that he was 27, that he had been on his own since he was 16, that he had a quick mind to match his impressive strength. When Yancey finally stood to leave, gathering his gear, Zelda walked him to the door. The night air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of sage and pine. Thank you, she said, the words inadequate for what she was feeling. For everything. He looked down at her, and in the moonlight, his eyes seemed to glow. Can I come back tomorrow? He asked. There's more work to be done if you want that irrigation system to work properly. Relief flooded through her. Yes, she said quickly. Please. He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle against her skin. Get some rest, Zelda. Tomorrow we'll start building something good here. She watched him walk away into the darkness, his broad form eventually disappearing into the night. Only then did she allow herself to touch her cheek where his fingers had been, marveling at the warmth that still lingered there. That night, she slept better than she had in months, her dreams filled with images of clear water and blue eyes, and a smile that made her heart race. Yancey returned at dawn, carrying tools she had not seen the day before. True to his word, he set about improving the irrigation system, digging channels from the pond to various parts of her property. Zelda worked alongside him, learning as he explained the principles of water flow and gradient. As they worked, they talked. Yancey had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, making her laugh when she least expected it. He asked her questions about her life, her hopes, her fears, and he listened to her answers with genuine interest. In turn, she learned more about him. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about losing his family to cholera when he was young, about making his way west with nothing but determination and strong hands. He spoke of the hard years working other men's claims before striking out on his own, about the satisfaction of building something from nothing. Sounds lonely, she observed as they took a break in the shade of the cabin. It was, he admitted, accepting the water she offered. But I told myself I preferred it that way. Didn't have to answer to anyone, didn't have to worry about anyone else. What changed? She asked. He looked at her with an expression that made her breath catch. I met a woman who rolled up her sleeves and tried to do the impossible all on her own. Made me realize that maybe going it alone isn't always the best way. Over the following days, Yancey became a fixture on her property. He built a proper chicken coop, reinforced the barn, and helped her plant new crops using water from the pond. Every evening, they shared supper together, and every night, Zelda found it harder to watch him leave. The attraction between them grew with each passing day, simmering just beneath the surface of their interactions. She caught him watching her when he thought she was not looking, his gaze heated and intense. And she knew he noticed the way she found excuses to stand close to him, the way her breath quickened when their hands accidentally touched. One afternoon, nearly 2 weeks after they first met, they were working together to expand the vegetable garden. The sun was hot overhead, and Yancey had removed his shirt, working in just his trousers. Zelda tried not to stare at the powerful muscles of his back, the way they shifted and flexed with each movement, but it was impossible not to notice. He drove a shovel into the earth with easy strength, turning over the soil in preparation for planting. Sweat gleamed on his skin, and she found herself mesmerized by the sheer physicality of him, the raw, masculine power contained in his frame. "You're staring," he said without turning around, amusement clear in his voice. She felt heat flood her cheeks. "I was just thinking," she said, trying to recover. He turned to face her, a knowing smile on his lips. Thinking about what? She could not find the words to answer, caught between honesty and propriety. He set down the shovel and moved toward her, each step deliberate and purposeful. When he stood before her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, she felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "I think about you too," he said quietly. "More than I probably should." "Yancey," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for, but knowing she needed something. He reached up and cupped her face in his large, calloused hands, his touch achingly gentle. "Tell me to stop," he said. "Tell me I'm reading this wrong, and I'll step back right now." Instead of speaking, she rose on her toes and kissed him. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. His lips were warm and firm against hers, and for a moment he went very still, as if surprised by her boldness. Then his arms came around her, pulling her against the solid wall of his chest, and he kissed her back with a passion that stole her breath. It was everything she had imagined and more. His mouth moved over hers with a hunger that matched her own, his hands sliding into her hair, scattering pins across the ground. She gripped his shoulders, feeling the hard muscle beneath her fingers, losing herself in the sensation of being held by him, wanted by him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I was hoping you felt the same way," he said, his voice rough. "How could I not?" she asked. "You walked into my life and changed everything. You gave me hope when I had none. You made me feel again when I thought I was too tired to feel anything." He kissed her again, softer this time, a sweet promise of things to come. "I'm not leaving," he said against her lips, "not unless you send me away." "Don't you dare leave," she said fiercely, tightening her grip on him. They stood there in the garden, wrapped in each other's arms as the sun moved slowly across the sky. Zelda felt like she was waking up from a long sleep, every sense heightened, every emotion amplified. This was what she had been missing, what she had needed, without knowing it. That evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Yancey took her hand in his. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm, sending shivers up her arm. "I should tell you something," he said, his voice serious. "The claim I was working in the mountains, it finally paid off. I have money saved, enough to buy land or start a business. I was heading to town to figure out what to do with it when I stopped here." She turned to look at him, uncertain where this was going. "That's wonderful," she said carefully. He met her gaze steadily. "What I'm trying to say is that I have resources. If you'll let me, I want to invest in this place, not because I think you can't do it alone, but because I want to build something with you, together." The offer took her breath away. "Yancey, that's too much. I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking," he pointed out. "I'm offering. This land, what you're trying to build here, it matters, and you matter to me more than I can put into words." Tears pricked at her eyes. "We've only known each other for 2 weeks," she said, though her heart was already saying yes. "I know," he said, "but I also know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I know that working beside you, building this place, feels more right than anything I've ever done. And I know that when I think about the future, you're in every vision I have." She squeezed his hand, emotion overwhelming her. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "It scares me how much I already care about you." "Then be scared with me," he said, pulling her closer. "Let's figure this out together." She leaned into him, resting her head against his broad shoulder, feeling safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced before. "All right," she whispered, "together." The weeks that followed were filled with hard work and stolen moments of sweetness. With Yancey's investment, they were able to buy quality seeds, proper tools, and even a few head of cattle. He proved to be as savvy with money as he was strong with labor, making smart decisions about what the ranch needed most. The pond he'd created became the heart of the property, its still waters reflecting the sky and feeding the network of irrigation channels they built together. The garden flourished, producing more vegetables than Zelda had ever managed on her own. She started making regular trips to town to sell their surplus, building relationships with merchants who were impressed by the quality of her produce. As the ranch began to thrive, so did their relationship. Yancey courted her properly, bringing her wildflowers from the mountains, taking her on evening walks by the pond, treating her with a respect and tenderness that made her fall deeper in love with him every day. They shared their first real kiss under the stars, standing by the edge of the pond with the sound of crickets singing around them. He held her like she was precious, like she was the most valuable thing in his world, and she knew without doubt that she wanted to spend the rest of her life with this man. One evening in early autumn, 3 months after they first met, Yancey asked her to walk with him to the pond. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the promise of winter, and the trees had begun to turn shades of gold and crimson. They stood at the edge of the water, watching the sun set behind the mountains, painting everything in shades of orange and pink. Yancey had been quiet all day, and Zelda could sense something was on his mind. "This is where it all started," he said, gesturing to the dam he had built. "I moved those boulders hoping to see you smile, and you gave me so much more than that." She leaned against him, savoring his warmth. "You gave me everything," she said. "Hope, help, love, things I didn't even know I needed." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Even in the fading light, she could see the intensity in his blue eyes, the emotion written across his rugged features. "Zelda Emerson," he said, his deep voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "I came to this place with no plan beyond passing through, but you changed everything. You showed me what it means to have a home, to have a purpose beyond just surviving. You made me want to build something lasting, something real." Her heart began to pound as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring. It was not fancy or elaborate, but it gleamed warmly in the twilight. "I'm just a mountain man who knows how to work with his hands," he continued. "But those hands want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to make this ranch everything it can be, together. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as joy flooded through her. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her with all the passion and love he had been holding back. She kissed him back just as fiercely, pouring everything she felt into that moment, this man who had rolled boulders to dam her stream and ended up damming the flow of loneliness in her heart. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at the same time, he lifted her off her feet and spun her around, his strength making her feel weightless. She threw her head back and laughed, pure happiness bubbling up from deep inside her. They were married a month later in a small ceremony in Sonora, with a handful of friends and neighbors as witnesses. Zelda wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, and Yancey wore new clothes that he was clearly uncomfortable in, though he looked devastatingly handsome. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Yancey kissed her with such tenderness that several of the women in attendance had to dab at their eyes. Zelda felt like her heart might burst from happiness, looking up at this mountain of a man who was now her husband, her partner, her love. The wedding supper was held at their ranch, under the stars, with tables set up near the pond. Their neighbors brought food and music, and they danced late into the night. Yancey held her close as they swayed to the fiddle music, his strong arms wrapped securely around her. "Happy?" he asked, looking down at her with such love in his eyes that it took her breath away. "More than I ever thought possible," she said honestly. "You made all my dreams come true." "Our dreams," he corrected gently. "Everything we build from here, we build together." That night, after the guests had gone and they were finally alone, Yancey carried her over the threshold of their home. He set her down gently in their bedroom, the one they would now share, and looked at her with such reverence that she felt tears prick her eyes again. "I love you," he said simply, "with everything I am." "I love you too," she whispered, reaching up to cup his face. "Thank you for stopping here that day. Thank you for seeing what I needed and giving it to me." He kissed her softly, then more deeply, and she gave herself over to the moment, to this man, to the beginning of their life together. The years that followed were not without challenges, but they faced every obstacle together. The ranch continued to grow and prosper, becoming known throughout the region for the quality of its produce and livestock. The pond remained the heart of the operation, a constant reminder of how their story began. In their second year of marriage, Zelda discovered she was expecting. Yancey was overjoyed, though he became almost comically protective, insisting she rest more and let him handle the heavier work. She indulged him because she knew it came from love, though she still worked in the garden and managed the business side of the ranch. Their first child was born on a spring morning, a healthy baby boy with his father's blue eyes and a loud cry that announced his presence to the world. They named him James, after Zelda's father, and Yancey held his son with such awe and gentleness that Zelda fell in love with him all over again. Watching her mountain man, this powerful man who could move boulders and fell trees, cradling their tiny infant with infinite care, was one of the most beautiful things she had ever seen. "He's perfect," Yancey whispered, his voice thick with emotion, just like his mother. "He has your strength already," Zelda said, smiling as the baby gripped his father's finger with surprising force. "He's going to be just like you." As James grew, he did indeed take after his father, becoming a sturdy, active child who loved following Yancey around the ranch. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, whom they named Rose. She had Zelda's auburn hair and a sweet disposition that charmed everyone she met. The ranch became a true family operation. Yancey built additions onto the house, creating more space for their growing family. The vegetable garden expanded into a full produce farm, and they added apple and pear orchards that thrived thanks to the reliable water from the pond. Zelda proved to be a shrewd businesswoman, negotiating contracts with merchants in San Francisco and Sacramento. The Dalton Ranch became synonymous with quality, and their products commanded premium prices. But despite their growing success and prosperity, they never forgot their humble beginnings. Every year on the anniversary of the day they met, Yancey and Zelda would walk to the pond together, hand in hand, and remember. They would stand by the dam he had built, looking at the still water, and give thanks for the chance encounter that had changed both their lives. "Do you ever regret it?" Zelda asked one year, as they stood watching the sunset reflected in the pond's surface. "You were free in the mountains, answerable to no one. Now you're tied down to this place, to me, to our children." Yancey pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I've never been freer than I am with you," he said. "In the mountains, I was alone. Here, I have everything that matters, a home, a family, a woman I love more with each passing day. That's not being tied down. That's having roots, having purpose." She leaned into his embrace, marveling at how safe she always felt in his arms. "I still can't believe you moved all those boulders in one afternoon," she said, a smile in her voice. "You were showing off," he laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Maybe a little," he admitted. "But it worked, didn't it? By evening you had a pond and I had your smile. Best trade I ever made." As their children grew older, Yancey taught James how to work the land, was passing on the skills and knowledge he had accumulated over years of hard labor. He taught him about reading the land, understanding water flow, and the importance of planning for the future. But more than that, he taught him about respect, hard work, and treating people fairly. Zelda taught Rose how to manage the household and the business aspects of the ranch. She showed her daughter that a woman could be both strong and graceful, that there was no shame in hard work, and that intelligence and determination could open doors that might otherwise remain closed. But both children learned the most important lessons simply by watching their parents together. They saw the way Yancey still looked at Zelda like she hung the moon, even after years of marriage. They witnessed the partnership between their parents, the way decisions were made together, the mutual respect and love that formed the foundation of their relationship. When James was 10 and Rose was 8, a severe drought struck the region. Many of their neighbors struggled as wells ran dry and streams dwindled to nothing. But the Dalton Ranch, with its pond fed by the dammed stream and carefully managed irrigation system, continued to thrive. Yancey and Zelda made the decision to share their water with struggling neighbors, helping them irrigate their crops and water their livestock. It was a decision born of the kindness Yancey had shown Zelda all those years ago, the understanding that sometimes people need a helping hand. "We have more than enough," Zelda said, as they discussed opening their pond to neighbors. "It would be wrong to hoard it when others are suffering." Yancey pulled her into his arms, love shining in his eyes. "This is why I love you," he said. "You have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known." Their generosity during the drought cemented their place in the community. When the rains finally came again, their neighbors remembered who had helped them in their time of need. The Daltons became respected leaders in the region, known not just for their successful ranch, but for their character and kindness. As the years passed, Zelda and Yancey welcomed 2 more children, another son and another daughter. Their house was filled with laughter and love, the sound of children playing, the warmth of family dinners around a crowded table. But through it all, the connection between Zelda and Yancey remained as strong as ever. They still made time for each other, still walked to the pond on quiet evenings, still shared secrets and dreams in the darkness of their bedroom. One evening, when they had been married for 15 years, Zelda found Yancey standing by the pond, staring at the dam he had built so long ago. The structure had been reinforced over the years, made permanent and strong, but the original boulders he had moved were still there, the foundation of everything they had built. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. He was quiet for a moment, then squeezed her hand gently. "I was thinking about that first day," he said. "I was walking through, planning to pass right by your property, but something made me stop. Maybe it was seeing you working alone, or maybe it was something I can't explain. Whatever it was, it changed my life." "It changed both our lives," she said softly. "I was so lost back then, so tired. I didn't know how I was going to make it work. And then you appeared, like some kind of miracle." He turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands the way he had done so many times over the years. Despite the passage of time, his touch still sent shivers through her, still made her heart race. "You were never lost," he said. You were just waiting for the right person to come along and help you find your way. And I was wandering, looking for a place to belong. We found each other exactly when we needed to." She rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring 15 years of love and gratitude into that single moment. He kissed her back with the same passion and tenderness he had always shown her, making her feel cherished and desired and deeply, completely loved. When their children were grown and starting families of their own, Zelda and Yancey finally had time to slow down and enjoy the fruits of their labor. The ranch was well established, running smoothly under the management of James, who had grown into a man very much like his father, strong, capable, and kind. Yancey was now in his mid-50s, his dark hair streaked with silver, but he was still powerfully built, still capable of a full day's work. Zelda had lines at the corners of her eyes and threads of gray in her auburn hair, but to Yancey, she was as beautiful as the day he first saw her. They spent their mornings tending a small garden they kept for themselves, their afternoons visiting with their growing brood of grandchildren, and their evenings sitting on the porch, watching the sunset over the land they had built together. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Zelda asked one evening, as they sat together on the porch swing Yancey had built. "When I asked why you would help a stranger?" He smiled, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "I said everyone deserves a helping hand now and then." "You gave me so much more than just a helping hand," she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," he corrected. "I was just a lonely man working claims in the mountains. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You made me whole." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The sound of the pond, that constant gentle lapping of water against the shore, provided a soothing backdrop to the night. "I want you to know something," Yancey said eventually, his voice serious. "Every single day of these past decades I've been grateful. Grateful for that impulse that made me stop here. Grateful for your smile. Grateful for every moment we've had together. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Zelda Dalton." Tears sprang to her eyes, as they still did when he said things like this. After all these years, he could still move her to tears with his sincerity and love. "And you are mine," she whispered. "My mountain man, who rolled boulders to give me a pond and ended up giving me the world." As the years continued to pass, they watched their grandchildren grow, welcomed great-grandchildren, and saw the ranch continue to prosper under the stewardship of their descendants. The pond remained, as constant and reliable as their love, feeding the land and providing life to everything around it. When Zelda was in her early 70s, she fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. Yancey barely left her side, caring for her with the same tenderness he had always shown. He brought her water, kept her warm, read to her from her favorite books, and held her hand through the long, difficult nights. "You're not allowed to leave me," he said one night, his voice rough with fear and emotion. "We have a deal, remember? Together. Always." She squeezed his hand weakly. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. "I'm too stubborn to let a little pneumonia beat me." And she was. With Yancey's devoted care and her own formidable will, Zelda recovered. By spring, she was back on her feet, moving more slowly perhaps, but with the same determination that had always defined her. "You scared me," Yancey admitted, as they took a slow walk to the pond on one of the first warm days of spring. "I realized I've never really thought about life without you." "Well, you don't have to," she said firmly. "We're going to grow old together, you and I. We're going to sit on that porch and watch our great-great-grandchildren play. We're going to celebrate 50 years of marriage, 60 years, maybe more." He pulled her close, being careful of her still recovering strength. "That sounds perfect," he said. "As long as I'm with you, everything is perfect." They did indeed celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by 4 generations of their family. The celebration was held at the ranch, with tables set up all around the pond, just as it had been for their wedding reception 5 decades earlier. As Zelda looked around at the faces of their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, she was overcome with emotion. All of this, everything they had built, had started with a mountain man and some boulders and a decision to help a stranger. During the celebration, James stood up to make a toast. He had inherited his father's powerful build and his mother's sharp mind, and at 48, he was the respected patriarch of his own growing family. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass. "Dad, you taught me that real strength isn't just about muscle. It's about character, about showing up, about doing what needs to be done even when it's hard. Mom, you taught me that intelligence and determination can overcome any obstacle, and that kindness is never wasted." He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion. "But most importantly, you both taught me what love looks like. You showed me that marriage is a partnership, that you can disagree without being disagreeable, that working together makes you stronger than working alone. The legacy you've built isn't just this ranch. As impressive as that is, your real legacy is the family you've created, the values you've instilled, and the example you've set. To 50 years of love, partnership, and building something beautiful together. To 50 years, everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Yancey looked at Zelda, his blue eyes still as bright and intense as they had been when he was a young man of 27. 50 years, he said softly. "And it still feels like yesterday that I first saw you, hammering that fence post, determined to make this place work against all odds." 50 years, she repeated, touching his weathered face tenderly. "And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." He kissed her softly, not caring that their entire family was watching, and she kissed him back, feeling the same flutter in her heart that she had felt the very first time. As the sun set that evening, painting the pond in shades of gold and rose, Zelda and Yancey stood together at the edge of the water, just as they had done countless times over the decades. The dam was still there, solid and strong, the boulders Yancey had moved with his bare hands still forming the foundation. "This is where it all started," Zelda said, echoing words Yancey had spoken so many years ago. "You moved those boulders for a stranger, hoping to see her smile." "Best decision I ever made," Yancey said, pulling her close. "By evening, you had a pond, and I had your smile, your heart, your love. I had everything." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "We have everything," she corrected. "A life well lived, a family that loves us and each other." They stood there as the stars began to emerge, holding each other close, grateful for every moment they had shared and every moment still to come. The pond sparkled in the moonlight, a testament to what could be built when two people worked together, when strength met determination, when love took root and grew. Years later, when they were both well into their 80s, Yancey's health began to fail. His powerful body, which had served him so well for so many years, was finally wearing out. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Zelda burned as bright as ever. On a warm summer evening, Zelda found him sitting by the pond, staring at the water with a peaceful expression. She settled beside him, taking his hand in hers, their fingers intertwining with the ease of decades of practice. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice raspier than it used to be, but still deep and warm, "about that first day, about how a simple decision to help someone changed everything." "It was never simple," Zelda said. "What you did that day was extraordinary. You saw someone in need and you didn't hesitate. You gave everything you had to help a stranger." He shook his head slowly. "You weren't a stranger. Not really. I think on some level I recognized you. My soul knew yours, even if my mind hadn't caught up yet." She felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I love you," she whispered. "I have loved you from the moment you asked to help, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I know," he said simply, "just as I love you. You made my life worth living, Zelda. Every moment with you has been a gift." They sat together until the stars filled the sky, talking about their life, remembering moments both big and small. They talked about their wedding day, about the births of their children, about the challenges they had overcome and the joys they had shared. When Yancey passed away peacefully in his sleep a few weeks later, with Zelda holding his hand, she felt like a part of her had gone with him. But she also felt immense gratitude for the life they had shared, for the love that had sustained them through so many years. At his funeral, which was attended by what seemed like half the county, their grandson Thomas gave a eulogy that captured the essence of the man Yancey had been. "My grandfather was the strongest man I ever knew," Thomas said, But his greatest strength wasn't in his muscles or his ability to work from dawn to dusk. His greatest strength was in his heart. He loved completely, worked tirelessly, and gave generously. He built not just a ranch, but a legacy, and he did it all alongside the woman he loved. Zelda stood at the graveside, supported by her children and grandchildren, and said her private goodbye to the man who had been her partner, her love, her everything. She placed a single wildflower on his casket, the kind he used to bring her when they were young and courting. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for the pond, for the smile you gave me, for the life we built together. Wait for me, my love. I'll see you again soon." Though her heart was broken, Zelda did not simply give up and waste away. She had too much of Yancey in her, too much of his strength and determination. She continued to live at the ranch, surrounded by her family, tending her garden and visiting the pond every day. She lived for 3 more years, years filled with great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, with the satisfaction of seeing the ranch continue to thrive, with the comfort of knowing that what she and Yancey had built would endure. On a spring evening, very much like the evening when Yancey had proposed to her so many decades before, Zelda passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her children found her in the morning, a peaceful smile on her face, her hand resting on the pillow where Yancey used to sleep. On her bedside table was a journal she had been keeping, and inside they found a final entry dated the night before she died. "Today I walked to the pond," she had written in her still elegant script. "I stood by the dam Yancey built for me all those years ago, and I could almost see him there, young and strong and full of determination. He moved mountains for me, quite literally, and in doing so, he moved my heart. Tomorrow I think I'll see him again. I can feel him calling to me, waiting for me on the other side. And I'm ready. I've had a beautiful life, filled with more love and joy than one person deserves. My children and grandchildren carry forward the legacy Yancey and I built together. To anyone who might read this someday, don't be afraid to help a stranger. Don't be afraid to work hard for something that matters. Don't be afraid to love with your whole heart. Because a mountain man once rolled boulders to dam a stream for a woman he barely knew, and by evening she had a pond and he had her smile. And from that simple act of kindness grew a love story that lasted a lifetime and will echo through generations. I'm ready now, ready to walk beside my mountain man again, to hold his hand, to see that smile that always made my heart race. Wait for me, my love. I'm coming home. Zelda was buried beside Yancey on a hill overlooking the pond where they could watch over the land they had loved and nurtured for so many years. Their gravestone was simple, bearing their names and dates, along with an inscription chosen by their children. Together, they built a legacy of love. By evening, she had a pond, and he had her smile, now reunited, forever. The ranch continued to thrive under the stewardship of their descendants, the pond still providing life and prosperity to the land. Every generation that followed learned the story of how it all began, of the mountain man who moved boulders for a stranger and the woman whose smile had captured his heart. And sometimes, on quiet spring evenings, family members swore they could see 2 figures standing by the pond, hand in hand, watching the sunset together. Whether it was real or simply the power of a love story that refused to fade, no one could say. But everyone agreed that the legacy of Yancey and Zelda Dalton was woven into the very fabric of that land, as permanent and enduring as the boulders he had moved, as constant as the water that still pooled behind the dam he had built. Their love story became a legend in Sonora, told and retold through the generations. Parents told it to their children as an example of true love, of partnership, of building something lasting together. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a simple act of kindness, that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, and that when 2 people commit to building something together, they can create a legacy that endures long after they're gone. The pond remained, season after season, year after year, a living memorial to a love that had transformed 2 lives and created something beautiful. And at its heart, holding back the water and making it all possible, were the boulders a mountain man had moved for a stranger, for a smile, for love. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the success of the ranch or the prosperity they had achieved, but the love they had shared, the family they had created, and the example they had set. Yancey and Zelda Dalton had shown that with strength, determination, and love, anything was possible. They had shown that true partnership meant working together, supporting each other, and building something greater than either could achieve alone. Their story lived on in every spring that brought new life to the ranch, in every sunset reflected in the still waters of the pond, in every couple who stood hand in hand by that water and made promises to each other. It lived on in the values their descendants carried forward, in the kindness they showed to strangers, in the determination they brought to their work. And so, the legacy of the mountain man who rolled boulders to dam a stream continued, generation after generation, a testament to the transformative power of love, the importance of helping others, and the beautiful things that can grow from a single moment of connection between two souls who were meant to find each other. The pond sparkled in the sunlight, the dam stood strong against the current, and somewhere beyond mortal sight, a mountain man and his beloved wife walked hand in hand through eternity, their love story complete, their legacy secure, their hearts forever intertwined.